So I'm sure you've heard the term safe space and why it's really important. But today, I'm going to make you think about the dangers of using this term safe space when it comes to conflict and difficult conversations and facilitation. And if you stay to the end, I'm going to share with you a story of how I learned the hard way about the use of safe space language. So in dialogue circles, in facilitation, in many of our workplaces and schools, people are always talking about creating a safe space. And I'm really sympathetic to this idea. However, I think the word safe is actually the wrong word to be using. Now listen, I know it sounds great, right? Yes, we're going to have a difficult conversation. Let's create some safe space. Or I want you to share your vulnerabilities or your emotions or maybe some tough story or history or trauma. And in order to be able to do that, we need to create conditions that make it safe for you to do this. So what could go wrong here? Why am I so concerned about the use of the word safe space? So here's the challenge. When you are bringing people together in a room for a hard conversation, for a dialogue across lines of difference, for a chance to share their experience and their history. As much as you try, as much as you want to, you actually can't guarantee their safety. It's like saying you're creating a safe car. I just don't think you can create a completely safe car. Why? Well, because cars get into accidents, and no matter how well built that car is, 5-star safety, there is a chance, and a non-trivial chance, that if you're in a bad accident, you or someone else in the car might get hurt. Similarly, when I bring people together into a difficult conversation, and people are being raw with each other, and people are sharing their perceptions and their histories and their vulnerabilities, as the facilitator, as the person bringing that room together, I just can't guarantee safety because I don't know what's going to trigger somebody. I don't know what's going to upset somebody. I don't know what's going to make somebody feel really hurt and angry. So I think a better word, when I say better, I mean more honest and more accurate, is to say that we're creating a low-risk space, a space that feels safer than the average space. In the same way that one could create a car that is safer than another car. It's not totally safe. And I think if you create the right conditions, you can actually make an honest, look you in the eye guarantee that this is a low-risk space as opposed to just a safe space. And if you want to create low-risk space in difficult conversations, here are 3 things to keep in mind. First, it is essential to set some ground rules. So what might that look like? The first piece is just really being clear about what is the purpose of the conversation. Is this a debate? Are we trying to share experiences? Are we trying to share interests so that we can figure out whatever it is we're going to do coming out of this conversation? You might think the purpose is clear, but chances are people showing up for this conversation have very different ideas about what the purpose is. And if there's not alignment on this, it's going to be a much bumpier ride. Second, set up a ground rule of step up and step back. What does that mean? Well, it's really an invitation to those who tend to be quieter or more observational to have the courage to step up and to speak. It's also an invitation for those whose hands are always up, the first person who always talks in a group, to step back and leave some room for other people. Third, have a ground rule of speaking from your own perspective. So when we speak from our own perspective, in my experience, from my view, the way I look at things, it's really hard for people to say, that's wrong. They can say, that's very different from my experience, or I don't see it that way. But it's a much easier place from which to listen and to share, as opposed to saying, on behalf of all people from Cambridge, Massachusetts, or as a white guy, or as an Italian Syrian American, as soon as you try to speak on behalf of a group, it can be somewhat dangerous. You're trying to claim the mantle of a whole identity. Fourth is really encouraging active listening. Listening that is generous and open. And if you want to learn more about listening, there's a great video on this channel on how to listen well. Fifth, giving people permission to say ouch. So what that means is if someone else in the room says something that you find hurtful or offensive, encouraging them to say ouch, to assume good intentions, but to let it be made known that that was upsetting, and then invite that person to say why it was hard to hear. So once you have these ground rules in place, let me give you a second really important piece of advice, which is inviting people to be raggedy. What on earth does being raggedy mean? So this is a term that I learned in some of the work that I do with an organization called Seeds of Peace. Seeds of Peace brings together folks across lines of difference for a really challenging dialogue. Some of that work is with Israeli and Palestinian young leaders, some of that work is in India, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and some of that work is actually within the United States, inviting high school students to have conversations across all sorts of lines of difference. And the idea of being raggedy is basically an invitation to say, you don't need to be perfectly articulate and put together when you speak. You can be raggedy, meaning that it might not make total sense, but that people will receive that in a spirit of good intentionality. And you could then clarify, and in fact, they'll even help you get the ideas the way you want them. So I have been in many of these really tough conversations where someone will say permission to be raggedy, meaning they're going to put something forward, but they're not necessarily prepared to defend it. They might need some correction and they might need some help. And I think what it encourages is a spirit of generosity and a spirit of vulnerability. Third really important setup is to normalize breaks. If I'm bringing people together to have a really hard conversation, whether it's around immigration or abortion or climate or guns or any of the kinds of things that feel really emotional to people, allowing people to just say, can we take a time out, is helpful. And when you normalize it, then when they're asking for it, it doesn't feel like something has gone wrong. It just feels like it's part of the process. I have to tell you, unfortunately, I learned the hard way about the danger of suggesting that I could create safe spaces. I had done a training with some young people and was talking all about how to create safe space. And then late at night, a group of these young people went off and they decided to have a safe space conversation. Well, about 11:30 at night, I get a knock on my door. I was in a hotel from one of the counselors who was involved in this organization saying, "We need you, Bob. There's been a major meltdown downstairs." And what had happened is, in the zeal of these young people to practice the skills, they had decided to have a really hard conversation with each other, and it had gone really poorly. And there were tears. People were literally in corners with their arms crossed. It took really most of the next day to get this group back in place. And what I realized is that people actually even said to me, like, that wasn't safe. It didn't feel safe to me. And so it was a real lesson for me to take one step away and say, hey, I can create low risk space. Here's some ways to do it. And like, truth is, like, this might be a bit bumpy and we might feel a little bit hurt, and that's okay. Like, living in that discomfort is okay. Okay, so to summarize, instead of using safe spaces, I would invite you to use the phrase low risk space. And to create low risk space, I want you to keep three things in mind. First, spend time establishing ground rules. Second, invite people to be raggedy. Make it easy for them to not always be articulate. And third, normalize breaks, particularly when emotions run high and people are feeling exhausted and testy. Okay, so before you leave, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and hit the notifications button so you never miss new content. And keep watching this next video on the Chinese spy balloon over the US. Okay, keep watching.